This is a Geek Leader. Hey guys, welcome to episode 167 of a Geek Leader podcast. I'm your host, John Rauda, and special thanks to Private Internet Access. I've been a customer of Private Internet Access for 3 years now, and I love this service. I was at a security conference a few years back, and I connected to the hotel Wi-Fi, and immediately my endpoint protection software started alerting me that I was being attempted to be hacked, and I guess you could expect that from a security conference. But anyway, I launched my VPN from Private Internet Access, and all the attempts just stopped. My data and the internet connection is now secure with Private Internet Access, and I've been using their service again for 3 years, and I love it. I love the fact that you can choose different geographical locations, so you can test things like how your DNS is resolving and use it for many different reasons. But that's one definite use case for the different geolocations that you can choose with Private Internet Access. And you can get your VPN starting at $3.33 per month. Yes, that's right, $3.33 per month by going to geekleader.com/VPN. All right, Geek Leaders. Today on the show, we've got Doug Farrell, and he wrote a book about Python that we're going to be talking about, but we also want to talk about his career and his journey in through technology and all the changes that he's seen. And then we're going to get into some fun stuff about how you can use Python to do some pretty cool things and why Python is even something that we're talking about on a Geek Leader podcast. With all that being said, Doug, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here, John.
So if you don't mind, tell the audience just a little bit about kind of how your career through technology has evolved, what you're doing now, and kind of how you got there.
Sure. I've been doing programming and development for a long time. I got started kind of late in my late 20s. I bought a Radio Shack color computer back in the day in 1982 and learned a little BASIC and some assembly language because that machine only ran at a kilohertz, not even a megahertz. And that gave me enough buzzwords to get my first engineering job. My degree is in physics, so I'm not even a developer, a computer science guy, self-taught. And so I got a job doing process control for a company that does a lot of gas pipeline and water purification systems for municipalities, and did that for 5 years. And I showed an aptitude for software, so I moved over to their software development group and was working in Fortran and C on VAX VMS systems. And after that, I've had a lot of jobs since then. I've moved around a lot. One of the things I found to be true about engineering is one way that worked for me to make a better living was to change jobs and to track the things that interest me, the kinds of work and the kind of code that I wanted to write. After that, I joined a small kind of a robotics firm. They made a machine that did pick and place software. And what it does is it picks up parts they build a machine that picks up parts and puts them down on circuit boards. So it assembles very high precision circuit placement on PCBs. And that's about, I guess the one that I worked on that was the fastest was about 20,000 parts an hour. So that's kind of,
my gosh,
all in bud.
Wow.
That was fun.
That is super fast. I was just watching a documentary, or it's a docuseries that just came out on Netflix called History 101. And they had an episode about robotics, and they were talking about the differences between a robot, versus a human. It's just mind blowing. But 20,000 parts an hour. Wow.
Yeah, there was a lot of exciting moments where, you really have to pay attention to safety on that thing because you don't want people's hands to get in there and get hurt. So it's in a way, it's kind of colored my career, having done that kind of work, because now, people come running into my office and, complain about this web page is down or that form isn't working. There's no severed limbs, no spurting blood. Okay, I'll get right on that. But that place it was a lot of fun to work. The crew there was a lot of fun. We did a sort of a soft real-time system based on a DOS extender of all things, and it was there that I first got exposed to object-oriented programming. And after that, I finally ended up at a company called Grolier. I don't know if you remember them. The Grolier online encyclopedia is a CD-ROM.
Oh yeah, I do remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, kind of.
That was back in like the late 90s or so.
Yeah, late 90s.
Yeah.
Just prior to the internet. And I jumped to them, and then we got involved in putting our reference titles, the encyclopedias, online.
That was the death of Britannica.
Pretty much. It wasn't long for us either, let me tell you.
Yeah, when Wikipedia came out, I guess that kind of.
Yeah, we would constantly have to, make the case like, why would anybody use us over Wikipedia? But we were doing a lot of heavy object-oriented programming, and that was really where I got into Linux for one, and then discovered Python, because they were sort of, at that time they were doing web-based development using CGI code with C, which was just horrendous.
Yeah.
And they were thinking about using Perl, and I looked at Perl and was just horrified by the syntax. I really didn't like it at all. And then I just happened upon Python, and the thing that attracted me to it was the built-in support for object-oriented code, because I was firmly both feet in that camp. And I picked it up and ran with it, and we eventually, PHP became our main server-side language for presenting web information, but our back-end processing and a lot of bulk tools and batch processing was done with Python. Because it was just so quick to be able to turn things around. We had a very fast, surprisingly for a publishing company that does reference work, the reference stuff changes all the time with new material. And we needed to have a pretty quick turnaround on applications. And Python, one of the things I really like about it is the speed of development, which is really very important, because I often quote this thing about myself, that the cost of software is not, or the speed of software is not really the cost. It's my cost, the cost of me, how much it costs for me to develop software. And being able to turn things around very quickly was important. At that job, I eventually ended up being manager of the internet group for a year. And I eventually decided that management was not for me. I had spent a lifetime learning my software skills, and they were starting to slip after a year of management. Plus, I was attending, probably this was just the job, I was attending 7 hours of meetings a day and arguing about whether to use a comma or a semicolon too much in text.
Yeah, I remember those days. So like when I first became a manager, I mean, managing is tough. It's a completely different skill set. It's like, let's take someone who's really good at writing software, developing code, finding solutions to problems, and let's let them talk to people all day long, and not do the things that they're really good at. And that was like my transition. And I remember sitting in meetings, and we literally spent an hour discussing, how far to indent tabs when we're writing our. I'm like, why?
Oh my gosh!
Why are we doing this?
Yeah, what is this conversation?
Should the semicolon be on the line below? I mean, oh my gosh. But anyway,
that's the funny thing is that I'm actually fairly good at cross-discipline conversations and interfacing with other discipline groups. But I was spending all my time losing my own skills. I was giving myself the very worst projects because I was giving my team the better ones, the more interesting ones. And although I really like mentoring, and I still do a lot of that, and taking care of my team and teaching, I didn't care for the rest of it. The scheduling, having to worry about their vacation time, and all of the personal review stuff. A lot of the overhead of being a manager, I just didn't care about it enough. I certainly didn't care about budgeting enough for my manager. Probably drove her crazy. But eventually I got a job offer that was really good to go back into being a developer full-time at a place that they were doing Python. That was why they were interested in me. And that eventually turned into working at Shutterfly, which has been fantastic. And there I work on the back-end systems writing, a lot of back-end code that supports production. But I work in the production department where we turn customers' orders into printed material. So that straddles a nice border for me between the mental gymnastics of really interesting coding and the real world of interfacing with stuff like I used to do with the robotics.
So I've ordered from Shutterfly many times. I got 3 kids, and all of our birthday invitations come from there, and Christmas cards. And it's mind blowing the how fast they turn those things around. And now I don't know if part of it's the fact that I am literally 3 miles away from Shutterfly, so I'm right there at the location in Fort Mill. Yeah, so it's not a big deal for them to turn it around quickly, but I can get it pretty quickly.
It might help a little bit with the shipping, but otherwise it's just amazingly fast.
Mm-hmm.
How once an order gets into the system, how quickly it gets pre-processed, what we call in position, print ready, and then actually on a press, cut, packaged, shipped, and delivered. It's amazing.
Yeah. So I guess there you're probably doing a lot of interfacing with orders that come in, reading the data, figuring out how to do it, just deciding which machines are going to print, and and executing that process, and then giving it away to be labeled and packaged and pushed out the door.
Oh yeah, there's a ton of work into routing orders to the right printing presses, like books, versus cards versus coffee mugs and travel mugs, glass printing, ornaments. They all have different processes to actually manufacture them, and that's all handled automatically. And then there's also a lot of getting things print ready, where our orders are JPEGs. When they come up from the customers, we have to get those into a print ready form and formatted into a PDF file that can be sent to the press in the right orientation, in the right, particularly like things like canvas printing, where you can print multiple canvases across a large inkjet printer. We have to do stuff where we organize those things to take the best advantage of the material and get as much stuff printed out at once. And then there's after things are actually turned into physical pieces, there's a lot of handling that goes on that we also track with software that we write, like scanning barcodes on things, so we can track the progress of orders through the plant and also keep track of them, because an order can consist of multiple parts.
Do you use like RFID tags to track where they are in the building, or?
They actually have everything has a barcode on it, and they track it that way. And they use a consolidation system. It's just a cubby system to keep track of where things are in the plant. Okay. Most of the production stuff is so close together. Once it comes off the printer, the rest of it is right there. It's just assembly line, bang, 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 cut, mount, whatever, package and ship.
So going back to that, Shutterfly, the building right there, I told you before we started that I got my first tech job there. And to go back even further, I was an intern. I went to college to be a business major. But prior to college, when I was at high school, my neighbor, who was also my youth pastor, would always bring home these old machines. He worked at NCR, and we would like rebuild these machines and make like 8086s and stuff like that to give out to churches so they can keep track of their stuff. And that was kind of like just a hobby that I did with him growing up. And then I went to college. So I'll be a business major. I don't know what I want to do, so I'll just do business. And I got a job as an intern in marketing at a company called United American Video in that same building that Shutterfly is in today. And because I spent most of my time just fixing everybody's computer, they ended up moving me to the IT department. And that kind of led my career. I went back and got my master's in software development, but that led to my career getting into technology, was in that building. Yeah. So that's cool. Pretty fascinating. So my experience with Python is very limited. I've only actually developed in it on one project, and that was a project using a GIS tool called ArcGIS. And I remember that I inherited a project. I took over a group. So I was manager of our web and mobile team at this company. And somehow I also became manager of the GIS team. And so I helped with them. And they were using Python to do all their mapping software and stuff like that. And I had never used it before. So I got into it, got a taste of it there. And I was really impressed with the speed of delivery for not just writing the code, but how quickly it was to get tested, to go through the whole process. So it was very impressive.
That's one of the things that's I find really terrific about the language is, one of the quotes that you just hear people who are familiar with Python is that it's almost executable pseudocode that you can just think and code pretty clearly and it will almost run, because there's just so much you can do with so little code. It's very expressive. The syntax is clean and clear. One of the idioms in Python is that there's usually one right way to do things, which I found very different than Perl, for instance, which is a million ways to do the same thing.
Yeah, with Perl, I learned Perl a long time ago, and we used it to interface with like DNS servers and other Linux devices. It was pretty easy to just run in there and run scripts, and we would just do a lot of little Perl scripts. But then I could look at two Perl scripts that did the exact same thing that were light years apart.
I felt the same way when I was reading some of the code. We were like, no, it's a write once language. You can never read it again, which is part of what I like Python. That's another idiom from software development where code is read much more than it's written. That matters. And I'm not a young guy, so my own stuff, when I come back to it 6 months later, I want to be able to read that stuff and understand what the heck was I thinking.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the
clear.
Yeah, that's one of the things that a lot of us have trouble with is what were we thinking? Another project that I was kind of adjacent to on Python is my team was building the front end, which was all in PHP, to connect to these Arduinos that we had set up on a fountain to control the height and of the jets of the fountain. And the whole backend was done in Python there, but we were just using PHP to make API calls into the systems. But that was a pretty neat little project. I know a lot of people use Python for IoT devices and things like that. Is it because of the simplicity, or is there some other reasons?
I think there's a couple reasons. One of them is the simplicity. The simplicity is kind of disarming, because I don't know if you remember Visual Basic stuff. I used to code in Visual Basic a long time ago, and it's very powerful up to a point. Like, you can get some stuff running very quickly, and then if you get sophisticated enough, unfortunately, it runs out of steam at complicated levels, and you're just like, it's really hard to do this. I need some complicated module that I have to buy in order to do something further. And I don't find that with Python, that it's the barrier to entry to Python is very low, and yet I've not run out of I haven't run out of things that I can do with it, and we do some fairly complicated stuff, and it's just amazing how it just keeps going. I think the other thing is the community and what they call the Python package index, which is where you can download third-party packages. That's, I think last year, long ago, it passed 100,000 packages, and those cover a wide domains of interest. So people who are doing IoT stuff, there's just all kinds of things that you can interface to. There's a company called Adafruit, where you can buy I/O boards and control boards, stepper motors, servo motor control boards that interface to Raspberry Pis or Arduinos, and even a device called a MicroPython, which is a small process, like a microcontroller version of Python for controlling devices. And it just makes Python, acts in those instances is acting as a glue language between a lot of different pieces, both hardware and software. But it does that so well that people can grasp what they're trying to do and get done very quickly. And I think that's the real success of Python, is that it allows people to transition from starting a project to getting something done very quickly, without a lot of the nonsense that goes into linkers or make files or all the support stuff that goes into more involved languages.
Yeah, no, I can definitely speak to that a little bit. When we were starting I was inheriting that GIS group and looking into it, I could easily understand the code of what was going on, because I was familiar with development. I knew, C#, C++, Perl, PHP. So looking at Python was easy to read it, to kind of understand what was going on. And, we didn't do a whole lot with it. I guess we were mapping technicians and where they were driving, and using ArcGIS engine to kind of overlay some cables and some other things that were in the ground already with that, and map that out. But it was very easy to do. And, you would have updates to projects that were happening, many times throughout the day. It wasn't like, let's do a build Thursday at 5. No, let's just build constantly, and let's continually, writing code and putting it out there. And it was, you were constantly getting, updates and revisions and things being done. And it was kind of surprising to work with that team, and then switch gears and go to my Java team and see how slower, things were going. And not because of the team, not because of the people, but because of their limitations.
Right. We have the same experience at Shutterfly. Shutterfly has acquired a lot of companies, like the one that I used to work at. And that means that they have a very heterogeneous tech stack. There's a lot of languages in the company. The original company, there still is a big block of Java developers that can support the existing systems. So when we got bought, Python was kind of a small part of our product, and we had to sort of survive by showing, we survived and grew by showing that, yes, we could deliver stuff much quicker. That agility that I talked about earlier, like people would throw stuff over the wall and we could turn it around in 2 days versus 2 months by some of the other software groups. And that's a very valuable commodity.
Yeah, definitely. So why did you decide to write a book? What was the why behind writing? Because it's one of those things where, like, I've been doing this podcast for a little bit, and I've had people say, "Oh, you should write a leadership book or technology leadership book." I'm like, you know what? Why would I do that? So tell me about why.
Well, besides being a wordy son of a gun, I like the sound of my own voice. I got into doing presentations at work. We have engineering all hands periodically, and I'm fairly good at speaking publicly. So I would do these presentations on various technologies that were interesting to people or myself, and that got a lot of positive feedback. And then I started turning some of those presentations into articles for a fellow named Dan Bader, who has a blog called dbader.org. And he and I got to know each other, and I was publishing some articles on his site. And then he bought a site called realpython.com, which is a much bigger blogging article resource for Python. And then I started writing for that site. I think I've written 5 or 6 articles now for realpython.com. And through that, an acquisitions editor at Manning Publishing got in touch with me and was talking about would I be interested in writing a book. And it never occurred to me because mostly, I'm a fairly busy guy. I got a lot, I have a day job and a family and all that. Mm-hmm. And he said, would you be interested in writing a book? I'm like, well, we talked about it back and forth. And I talked about the kinds of things that I thought would be valuable and that I don't see in the Python book market, which there are a lot of Python books. And we worked out a table of contents, and one thing led to another, and I signed a contract, and now I'm on the hook.
Yeah, I guess that's how it works. So your book is not for beginners, is that correct?
No, it is not. I don't profess to teach beginning Python. The expectations for my readers is that they know some of the basics of writing the Python language. They can build probably a simple single file Python program, but they know about loops and conditionals and variables, and maybe about modules, and maybe about downloading third-party modules. But my goal for the book is to take someone who's at that spot where they've got the basics down, they've got a basic tool belt, and I want to help them transition to become a developer, where they think about not being a programmer but being a developer, where they're thinking about the big picture and how can I use these tools, and why would I use these tools to make bigger projects, more complex applications, and how to think about things in terms of where I want to go versus how I'm going to get there. Mm-hmm. And so that's part of what the book is about, is presenting some things that I think are important as a developer. And then I think 2/3 of the book are building a Python-based web application for a blogging system, and which I don't think that's great. I mean, there's a lot of blogging systems you can just get off the shelf, but building the blog is not the point. I mean, getting the blog is not the point, but building the blog and using the techniques and tools and ideas that I present in the book, that is the point, to see how do I get these various complex things to come together into a cohesive application.
Yeah. Well, I like what you said about, being a developer and not a programmer, and that was one of the things when I was getting into management early and was managing, web and mobile developers. I wanted to make sure that my team knew that their goal was not to write lines of code, but to solve problems.
Yeah.
And if you can solve problems by writing code, perfect. But if there's other solutions out there that will solve the problem by maybe a process change, that's not necessarily writing a lot of code. Let's think about that too, because your job is to develop solutions, not necessarily just write code. So sometimes it's going to be expanding different things, reaching into different groups, and it's bigger than just being a programmer. And I like the fact that you're talking about that.
I like that too. My dad used to say this thing. My dad was a battery engineer for General Electric. He used to say this thing that an engineer is someone who can solve with $1 what any jerk could solve with $2.
No, that's a great quote.
But I drive my managers crazy because I'm always looking at the new technologies to try to solve problems that we have, or solve them better than what we're doing now, and transition to newer technologies. It's driven my career, and I probably continue to drive my managers crazy, like pushing, can we try this? And I write a lot of proof of concepts to try to demonstrate that stuff.
Well, that's always fun too, because it keeps you sharp and keeps you doing things. That's one of the reasons I teach part-time at Winthrop University, and I've been doing that for 15 years. And the reason why I teach is to keep me sharp, to keep my skills going. That's also a good recruitment tool. I can hire some of the people that I taught. I can pick the good ones.
I teach at a STEM place near me occasionally, and I probably need to up my age range because I'm teaching like 8 to 15-year-olds.
I got those at the house. I'm okay with that range. But what would you what do you think I should tell college students that I'm teaching? I teach in the information design program, which is our web design program at Winthrop. What do you think I should tell students about Python and what they should be learning, or what skills should they learn to be a better developer?
I think the big deal that I present is, one is that the programming is a huge topic that you can't approach it like, I'm going to learn programming and, the door's wide open to what I'm going to learn. And this is based on my being an applications person. I'm not a computer science guy, and I'm an applications person. So I'm looking to create applications that might have a narrow focus. But my goal when I teach is, if you want to learn something, pick a project that interests you, because it will narrow your focus of what you need to learn in order to accomplish that project. And plus, it will keep your interest up because you're interested in that project. Learning about red black trees and binary self-balancing binary trees, that's all really interesting from an academic sense. But if it's not applicable, it doesn't grab me until I need it. The other thing is that you really, this is not new. You have to really commit as a developer to being a lifelong learner, because things are changing so fast, especially with web-based applications. If you're in the JavaScript world, if you don't like something that's happening in JavaScript, wait 5 minutes, it's going to be different. And it's no different in other disciplines. Even Python is changing very rapidly. All the languages are changing very rapidly, and you have to be prepared to not only evolve, but even revolutionary evolve, like change languages, changing technologies. Kubernetes and Docker and some of the container stuff, the cloud computing stuff is challenging all of our existing stuff, to where I don't think there's, like other disciplines and other engineering disciplines, there's a lot of standards about how you do things, like building bridges, building roads, building houses, building buildings, electrical stuff. There's a lot of standards. I think as developers, we're still in the infancy of that, and we are still creating standards because we're throwing them out as fast as we're creating them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I know when you talk about things changing and how rapidly they change, I think back to, from the mobile development perspective, we were coding iPhone apps in Objective-C, and then almost overnight, it's like, well, now you have to use Swift. And,
yeah, right.
It's just, whoa, what's going on here? And everything is changing. I tell my students that the things that you learn in my class, 50% of them are going to be obsolete by the time you graduate.
Yeah.
So let's focus on the things that are important when it comes to learning, how to learn and learn how to move forward in other ways, not just focusing on just the language and just that going forward.
I do something like that with the kids in the STEM class. When I teach, I introduce, because I'm teaching a procedural based language, I talk about, right off the bat, the four corner pillars of, I think, procedural languages: variables, statements, loops, and conditionals. And that's it. If you can get those four things in your head, that you think about how to solve problems using those things in general, then you can move from one language to another, because I know how to solve this. I know where I want to go. How do I do it in this particular language? What's the tools and syntax of this language to do that? Right.
And I think you're absolutely right. It's one of the things that annoyed me when I would have like a new hire come in that was a younger person, and they said, well, I'm a JavaScript developer. It's like, you should just be a developer and let JavaScript be one of your tools, because you got lots of tools out there. If you understand the fundamentals, you can pick up a new tool and learn how to use it pretty quickly.
Yeah. I mean, I probably know like eight languages now. There's not many of them I'd want to go back to, and there's probably most of them are probably fairly rusty beyond Python and JavaScript. But
yeah, everybody picks one that they stick with. So this book, you said, is not for beginners. It's more for people that kind of understand the fundamentals of development and they want to take it to that next level. What are some things that people are going to get out of the book that will take them to that next level?
Well, one of the things I didn't want to write a beginner's book, and the other end of that spectrum, I thought, was there are a lot of expert level books like Black Hat Programming with Python, or Python cookbooks, or reference material for Python. Those I find very valuable. I find them valuable to me because I'm a developer already. I know the context of how I want to use those things, like cookbook recipes. Like, that may not relate to a particular problem I'm doing, but I can transmute it into something that's useful to me because I'm already a developer. So I'm trying to get that middle ground so I can get someone to that point where they can say, like I'm a weekend carpenter. I've got a bunch of tools. I want them to move to being more of a cabinet maker. So they have a set of tools and now they know how to use them together to achieve something. And that's my goal, is to show them how to think. What I hope is to show them how to think like a developer. Like, okay, I know class or object-oriented classes in Python. What does that do for me? Oh, well, now the very next thing, or somewhere in the book, I'm going to have a little thing about like why building a class for yourself is very useful. How to use those, as in my career, 90% of the code that I write is creating a class for a thing, and another class is a collection of those things. And iterating through them. And then so being able to have classes down pat makes that kind of thing possible. And hierarchies, just simple hierarchies. That's another thing I do most of my day, is like creating hierarchical structures of things, and being able to transpire across them.
So I was reading on your website earlier that you cycle. Is that right?
Yeah.
So when you're cycling, do you think about code, or is it your time to like check out and not think about code?
Oh, I try to think. Well, I'll tell you the secret is that my wife is also a cyclist, and she's a tremendous hill climber. So she's killing me on the bike. So I barely have time. I have to think about it. Am I going to have a heart attack or not? I check out on the code. That's a good time to check out.
Well, I have to say the one good thing I can think of from this whole COVID lockdown is that I've been riding my bike a whole lot more lately.
Yeah, Susan, my wife, and I bought a Peloton recently so we could ride while we're home, because although we ride a lot, it's not enough to say that it's a regular exercise like through the winter. So
yeah, especially in Connecticut. And I've got a Peloton Treadmill, and I've loved that thing. We bought that last year, and it's just been. I like to run outside. When we first got it, I was like, my wife got it because she wanted to run, and she didn't like to run outside. It's like I won't use it. I like to be outside. And then I started doing it. I'm like, the classes are actually fun. They're interactive.
Excellent.
That's now my go-to run place is the Peloton, not going outside. So
we do the same thing. I love that community on the Peloton. We did the same thing. We would go to spin classes for the social aspect, and it's kind of the same thing with the Peloton. We have a lot of our friends are through my daughter. She's an engineer as well, so we have a lot of these younger friends who we like to crush on the Peloton if we can.
Yeah, I never thought I was susceptible to being to the gaming profile kind of thing, because I never played video games that whole lot, and then I get in there and I see that I was like, oh, I can get that guy. Open up. So it's pretty fun.
I probably shouldn't, but I could tell you a whole bunch of stories. My wife can be very competitive on the bicycle, and we've done a lot of group rides, and if somebody passes, it's like, oh, the hammer's going down.
I shouldn't have done that. Oh, that's a lot of fun. So tell me where people can find your book and maybe read some of your articles and connect with you if they have any more questions about Python.
Sure. You can certainly find me on LinkedIn, and then on the Manning site, if you just search for the Well-Grounded Python Developer, or my name, Doug Farrell, it'll come to the page about my book. You can also find stuff that I've written. Let's see. On Manning, we currently have 6 chapters out in Manning's early access program. And then if you go to realpython.com and just search for my name, I did a whole series on REST applications in Python. So you can search for REST and it'll turn up. You can find the 5 articles I've written for the site. I think I have a 6th one coming out soon, to get familiar with my style of writing and the kinds of ways I convey information, which I hope work for people.
Yeah, and I'm going to link that up in the show notes at geekleader.com, and there'll also be a discount for people that go through there. So definitely check that out, and we'll talk more about that in the post. But yeah, there'll be a discount for folks. So if you're listening and you want to check that out, go to geekleader.com, get that discount code so you can pick up the book at a better price. Yeah. So, well, thanks a lot. I appreciate it. And I'm going to link the book up and your articles up as well, and to geekleader.com. So thanks for coming on the show. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, John. I appreciate being here.
Hope you guys enjoyed that conversation. And don't forget that you can sign up for private internet access for only $3.33 a month. Check it out at geekleader.com/VPN.